So, I normally get sent audio products by audio companies, but an audio company just sent me a gaming mouse, and that's a little confusing. But I used to review gaming mice back then, so might as well look at them now. So, this is what we're looking at today. Let's talk about it. Did it surprise you? Stay and watch the video to the very end to get a discount code on the thing we're about to be talking about in this video right now. So, you'll stay to the end or skip to the end, you heathens, you know who you are. Alright, so this is what we're working with. This is Gravastar's Mercury M1 Pro. That's just a fancy name for the fancier mouse. They have an M2, I believe, and that's actually their lower end one, which is a little less expensive and is made of plastic. This one is their magnesium alloy mouse, and I'm guessing they're copying off of like Razer's special edition mouse. You know what I'm talking about, the Viper Mini signature edition. So they're trying to go on that vein. But let's just crack open this box and see what we got. Oh, that's kind of nice. All right, now inside the box you're gonna get the mouse, of course, as well as a cable. Interestingly, you get a 1K wireless receiver as well as a 4K wireless receiver, because this thing has up to 4K hertz polling rate, which is pretty crazy and insane, honestly. You also get a USB A to C adapter, which is for the 1K little guy here, and you interestingly get extra mouse feet, or extra mouse skates if you want to call them that, as well as some grip tape for the mouse. Alright, now if we look at the mouse itself, it is pretty neat. I got the RGBs on right now. As you can see, the color flow is pretty cool, and you can kind of see it through this biomechanical design. Now, the colorway I have is called the Battle-Worn Silver Mist version, and this does cost more because they will paint it like with several layers, and they'll sand away at it so that it'll show the underlayer a little bit that they had painted on, so it has this battle-worn effect to it, which is commonly seen in like mecha modeling, so like Gundam modeling, which I used to do. And with that knowledge, I do think the job was well done. It's got that actually pretty nice battle-worn look, like it's been through a space battle, so I do like that a lot. I should note that the battle-worn effect does make it cost $130, and if you don't want the the battle-worn effect, and you just want it to be like gunmetal gray, which they do have, it'll only cost you $100, so that's pretty neat. I'm just gonna turn this off for the time being, but anyway, while we're at the bottom, the cutouts are still here as well, and here comes my first complaint, which is, I don't know why, for at the price that we're paying, we're still getting like Teflon feet. I would have expected, PTFE feet for like those smoother glides. And while we're on materials, this mouse, the M1 Pro in particular, is made of a magnesium alloy, so it has taken some notes from the Razer like Viper Mini Signature Edition. Shape-wise, it has taken more notes from the G Pro Wireless, and a little bit of like DNA from like the regular Viper, which is mostly just in like the cutouts to keep it light and whatnot. Now, I'm not a big specs ready kind of guy, so here they are on the back of the box. So, sensor, I did research, is pretty good. It has up to 26,000 DPI, which, everyone's got this giant DPI base, so I don't know if that like matters too much. Now, this thing does go up to 4,000 hertz polling rate, which is supposedly really good. I don't know if it makes much of a difference compared to 1,000, which is like standard for gaming mice these days, but for some people, maybe you would notice. For me, I don't know. Weight-wise, it says it is 88 grams, so it's a lighter mouse, but it's not the lightest mouse. In fact, it's heavier than the G Pro Wireless, so there is that. Some of you guys are using like 60-gram mice these days, but even then, for me, who uses like, a Razer Naga, which is pretty fat and heavy, 88 is still light in my book, but let's see if that's actually accurate. Now, I like to drink coffee, like lots of coffee, just all the coffee and whatnot, And because of this, I have really expensive scales for weighing coffee stuff, so this is a very accurate scale. It should be pretty sensitive. Well, that's not 88 grams, that's 90 grams. This back of box is now inaccurate, or maybe my model has something different that makes it 90, but I am getting this before it is like officially out there. It's technically still on pre-order, so maybe they'll change this on like the boxes you get and the models later on, but right now in the pre-order stage, this is what we're finding, 90 grams. Technically, it's still a light mouse, but it's not an ultralight, but for me, I think it's still a light mouse for me. Right now, I've been daily driving this mouse for about like a week now for like gaming and basic computing, and I do have some thoughts and concerns, and I also like thought to myself while reviewing it that maybe I wasn't the most qualified person to be reviewing a gaming mouse because I'm just not that deep into the weeds, only to realize that maybe I am the right person to be reviewing this mouse in particular because of some specs that make it written off by a lot of people already. First off, I know it is a light mouse, but it is still 90 grams. And then puts it on like the heavier end of light mouse. So while it is still a light mouse, it is not a super light or an ultralight mouse. Those mice range from like around the 60 gram range. That's 30 grams lighter than this guy, so people who use those mice will automatically write this off as being too heavy. But to your average consumer, this mouse would still be relatively light. And to a heavy mouse user like myself, who uses like the Razer Naga, this is like a 130 gram mouse. Well, it weighs a little bit more than 130 grams, so that'll give you some perspective. It's significantly heavier than this guy. So coming from the Naga Pro, the Mercury M1 is still relatively light, and as such, it performed in the ways I expected it to. While gaming in competitive games, I can definitely say I did feel a little faster, a little bit more snappier, and that might have to attribute to the fact that this mouse is lighter and therefore easier to handle. I don't want to say that it was attributing to like the 4000 hertz polling rate which I was using, because I don't know if it made much of a difference, because I did actually use this mouse in like its 1000 hertz polling rate, 2000 hertz polling rate, and 4000 hertz polling rate, and honestly I didn't find much of a difference in performance. They all felt fine, honestly, but you know, if you're like super hard deep into it, I guess you would stick to 4000 hertz, but that will drain the battery for that refresh rate for the mouse, so I will say that right now. But even then, the mouse battery seems to be pretty okay. It lasted like about 2 or 3 days before I felt like I had to charge it as the battery came low, and this was running at like 4000 hertz with relatively like, you know, standard levels of gaming. Like intense gamers who game like all friggin' day, you might find your battery to last only maybe like 2 days at 4000 hertz polling rate before you have to like seriously charge it. As for those of you who won't be using this at 4000 hertz polling rate and will be using it at like 2000 or like 1000, you can expect a battery life of like 5 days to a week, or a little bit more depending on how much you use the mouse or not. I can imagine using it at 1000 hertz, you would last a little bit more than a week, at which point I don't know why you would get this mouse. You should just get the M2 and save a lot of money. So there's that. M2's, you know, 80 bucks. Anyway, if you do run out of batteries, I guess you could plug it in, but there is one strange problem. For whatever reason, you can go to 4000 hertz for the polling rate if you're wireless using the dongle, but if you're plugged in, you'd imagine you use all the ranges. No, the maximum range for your polling rate on this mouse, for some reason, at least as of like the current update the software is in, is 1000 hertz wired, which is kind of unusual. I don't know why they did that, but that's kind of how it is. You'd think it would access like 4000 hertz plugged in, but it can't, at least right now, as of like today of, you know, the late January 2024. Hopefully they update the software, because the software does feel a little half-baked, if I'm being totally honest. It doesn't feel quite done, but you know, we're still in the pre-order section, so maybe by the time the mouse officially releases for people to actually get into their hands, the software will be a little bit more complete. But I don't know. If you're watching this Gravastar, do, you know, work on your software a little bit more, try to add that wired, you know, constraint that I mentioned, and make things just a little smoother, because other than that, everything is pretty okay. All the basic adjustments you'd expect out of like a gaming mouse software are there, which is nice, but something I also really liked is the fact that there's this little option here where your RGB turns off if you're using the mouse. Like if the mouse moves, the lights turn off to help save battery. I think that's actually pretty smart, because like most people have the RGB on their mouse to look at when it's just sitting on their table, but if you're using it, your hands kind of cover it, you can't really see the RGB, so if it moves, the lights will turn off, you know, and that'll help it save battery, and you don't really care about it when, you know, the lights when you're using it. So that's a pretty smart move, honestly. Now, overall, I think this mouse is a really good gaming mouse. However, at its price, it stands at a strange place. Granted, this is like the special, like, you know, battle worn paint job edition, which sits at 130 bucks, which is a lot of money for what it is. It's mostly for the fashion, which seems to be the main point of this mouse, to be honest. And if you do want to save a bit of money, like actually not a bit, but quite a good deal of money, you can just get the plain unbattle worn version, which probably actually might be lighter because of the paint job, and that'll sit at 100 bucks like I mentioned before. And if you don't want that, you don't care about like the 4000 hertz polling rate, and you're willing to go down a bit, which I personally would be, just because I don't see the big difference, honestly, you can spend just 80 bucks and get the Mercury M2, which is also lighter because it's not made of metal. It's made of like some sort of plastic, and that'll make it at, you know, sit at like around 78 grams according to the website, and that's a lot more weight lighter than this guy, and I think that would be the one most people will actually gravitate towards, because the lightness kind of trumps the polling rate at this point. Heck, the only differences between the M1 and the M2 is the material and the polling rates they're capable of achieving. So everything else is essentially the same. Same buttons, same design, same different ways of connections. You can go wired, wireless with like the little dongle, and then wireless with Bluetooth, which we're not going to use because that's not great for gaming because of, you know, latency. Now, I will mention, you know, you're going to get another dongle with the M1 because it can achieve the 4000 hertz polling rate, which, you know, just makes sense. With the M2, you'll probably just get like the little dongle, which I just found out the 1000 hertz dongle can fit inside the mouse in case you want to, take it along with you. So that's kind of fun. I'm pretty sure the M2 has that too. As for the material, being made of plastic for the M2 isn't necessarily a downside. For some people, it's an upside because it's lighter at, 78 grams. That's much lighter than 90 grams. Come on. But then again, for some of you guys, you like that premium metallic feel and you're willing to sacrifice that extra weight for that nice feel, which then brings us to like who this mouse is for. Clearly not the highly competitive people who would go for things that are, much lighter, and you'll just write this mouse off completely. But for your average consumer, you will find this mouse possibly attractive, possibly not. Half of the money with this mouse is basically in the performance because it performs well. The other half is in the fashion, at which point, like, if you're into the fashion, you're into the look, it's a hard wearing mouse, it looks like it'll last a long time, then, it'll be worth it for you. But, it really depends on how you feel about the way it looks. Personally, for me, I kind of like it, but I think I'd actually go for the M2. Sacrifice a bit on that polling rate because I can't find the difference between like 1,000 to like 4,000 in my performance test with the gaming with this guy. 1,000 felt fine to me, 4,000 felt fine to me. Neither of them felt like they were any better or worse than each other. So I'm okay with going down to just, 1,000 hertz polling rate and having a plastic mouse that's a little bit lighter, so that I can be a little bit faster and snappier during these like intense gaming moments. For the average gamer out there, if you go from the M1 to the M2, the main upgrade you would get is basically just material and luxury of feel. That's about it. But for some of you guys, I guess that would be worth it, in which case, here it is. As for me, I'm still sticking to the Naga series because I can't live without the ring finger rest. I'm just weird like that. And in these trying times after Gravastar offered me this kind egg, they've also offered you guys a kind deal, which is 20% off any of these mice. I think any of these mice. I'm not sure if it's just the M1, but I think it's any of these mice if you use my little discount code TECH when you buy it off their website. So there it is, 20% off the mouse in case you're interested in the style. You want to save a little bit of money because 20% off is pretty good. Just want to put that out there. So if you do want to buy this guy, link in the description. That's where it's going to be. Use TECH as the code for your discount. Trust me, it just makes it a lot more worth it at this point. But yeah, this mouse is pretty cool. Very polarizing, I will say. And I don't know. It really depends on your taste at this point for fashion and looks and whatnot. Yeah, that's basically what I have for today. So, I'll see you guys next time.